All right, welcome everyone to the Limitless Interview series that I'm starting on my channel. And many of you have probably listened to me on the Essential Credentials podcast that I do with my buddy Greg. And through that podcast, I've had the chance to interview some wonderful people and some people with some inspirational stories as well. And I thought, well, it'd be really neat to interview someone, an individual who has been very inspirational to me growing up, and a musician producer who just released his first solo studio album. And that person is my dad, aka Bobby Burrows. What's up?
How you doing, Matt? Nice to talk to you, boy.
Man, thanks for joining me. Is it going to be okay? Can I call you Bobby during this interview?
Absolutely.
All right, sweet. So I thought it would be really cool to bring you on, Bobby, because growing up, you got me into music and you've inspired me to listen to all sorts of types of music. Mm-hmm. And I think a big part of that is because of your love for music. Right. You grew up listening to music and playing music from a very early age. And I thought it would be really cool to do a little, chat, some background on you.
Sure.
And talk a little bit about this new album that Everlasting that you just released yesterday. It came out all over major media music outlets for everybody to pick up and purchase and stream. I thought it'd be really cool to go into a few things and try to get some background and promote the album a little bit.
Sure. So, sounds good.
Great. Fantastic. So Bobby, where did your love for music originate from when you were young?
Well, I think the very start of it came from, my father was, I guess, just like me, where he would listen to his music and have me sit on his lap and listen to it. And he was strictly jazz and that type of music, traditional jazz and swing, like Glenn Miller, stuff like that from his age, right? Our era. And then when I saw my brother was a guitar player, he was my hero, my brother Danny. Mm-hmm. And so as I grew, my father wanted to know if I wanted to play. And I said, sure, let's start out on drums. So I took drum lessons for a year, and then that wasn't really for me. And when I got to be 12 years old, I decided, well, maybe I'll learn guitar like my brother Danny. And so my dad got me a cheap guitar. I think he got from a local music store up in Everett, Washington. And he got me the Mel Bay guitar series. And I didn't have any, formal teaching from a teacher. So my dad would force me to go up to my bedroom after school and practice for 2 hours before I could go outside and play. And he would make me play the lesson for him. And my brother would do the same thing also when he was around. He would say, hey, let me hear how this lesson's going, and so on and so forth. So as I began to progress, I began to appreciate it more, of course. And then I was listening to groups like the Beatles and Cream and Hendrix and Frank Zappa, all the stuff that was popular in the late 60s, early 70s. That was what I was exposed to, while my sisters were listening to R&B music like Motown. And then my mom, of course, listened to country, and I used to not even like that. But, I have appreciation for all that stuff. But I think that's how it started, as I wanted to be like my brother and also please my father. But as I progressed in it, then I just loved it. It was my passion.
So, let's fast forward just a little bit. You've got all these artists that you're listening to, all these bands, and you're drawing inspiration from. And am I correct that, and you've done this for me countless times, you'll hear a part in a song and then you'll go learn how to play that part. Was that something that you did at a young age as well, where you'd listen to a Beatles track and you'd say, okay, I want to go play this part of this song?
Right. I did that because the goal was to form a band or get into a band and play, just like my brother was. Back then we had this whole dance circuit where you could go play live music. And of course you're going to play cover songs from these groups. So yeah, you had to learn it. So I think, although I really liked all that music that I told you about earlier, the first guitar player that really struck me was a cat named Terry Kath from the band Chicago, the very first formation of Chicago. And the way he played just really struck me. So I wanted to learn everything about what he did. So I would sit down with the record player on vinyl and go listen to the solo or the rhythm part and take the arm with the needle, put it back, and over. I ruined my records that way. But back then we didn't have YouTube and all these apps that you can slow music down. It was a very long process. So after learning a lot of Terry Katz stuff, then of course, then I went on to learn some Hendrix licks and some Eric Clapton and George Harrison, the guys who were really big and strong back in those days. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. That's awesome. I mean, and I know that we've definitely chatted about this when it finally started happening, but I mean, I remember being about 9 or 10 years old, and I listened to a song called Woman in Chains, which you and I have agreed is one of the best songs ever written and performed. But I remember going back over and over and over again, listening to certain parts of that song. And I remember you telling me on the phone, you're like, son, you got that from me. And it probably reminded you of those times when you were listening to Terry play the guitar with Chicago and going back and listening to the same part over and over again and ruining your records. So yeah. Definitely want to give you a big shout out for giving that to me. That's definitely enhanced my music experience ever since that point. So
yeah,
awesome. So then you end up getting into your first band, right? Tell me, what was that experience like?
That was a lot of fun. The first and the longest run band I was in was called United Flight, and we were based out of Everett. But we started out small, and my dad managed us for a while, and we began to grow and was extremely popular in the Seattle area in the mid to late 70s. And we were working all the time. We went up and down the West Coast, up to Canada, the dance circuits, everything. We even recorded a couple of songs in I think it was an 8-track studio back in Seattle in those days. And we got some radio play, which made things better back then for us. But it was amazing, going from just a scrawny kid who couldn't play football anymore to being a musician and meeting all kinds of people and having respect from people. Hey, I heard you play and you guys are great. And we'd always have big crowds wherever we went. So that was an amazing time for me. I met my best friend who played bass for us at that time, Jim Alkire, and we're still best friends to this day. But that only lasted until you were born. Then it was time to settle down. But let's keep talking about music.
Yeah, well, shout out to Wally. I hope you get a chance to listen to that. I had the chance. I mean, we were talking a little bit about music and playing with Wally. I had the chance when I came and visited before to come see you play in one of your other bands that you were in called Gallery of Souls. And I think I could tell that was something that you enjoyed, but it wasn't, exactly what you have eventually got to. But, did that experience kind of help you learn a little bit about where you wanted to go, like where the direction of your music was going to go from that point on? I
think, I wouldn't say it helped me get in the direction, because I always had an idea of what I wanted the sound to be like. But it was invaluable experience as far as going into the studio and coming in as an outsider, because in that band Gallery of Souls, Jim and Nate Hartman and Mike Jamison, they formed that group and already had recorded all the major tracks. They just needed me to come in and play a few solos. So when I went up to their studio and up in Lake Stevens, Washington, and recorded a few solos for them, they asked me to join the group, and I said, sure, I'll do it. I'm playing in worship team in a church down in Tacoma, and it was fun being around the guys again, because once you were born, and then I took a step back from music. Well, I got back into it in the mid 90s to play for worship teams in the church circuit, in the Kojic circuit, which is totally explosive music. So those 12 years I played in that circuit really taught me how to improvise even better, how to follow other musicians and key in on cues from the drummer or the bass player or the keyboard player, whatever. So I would say those 12 years in that type of atmosphere was irreplaceable for me.
Right. Well, and also, I think if I remember correctly, you had the chance to go play with a band or two that asked you to come play at a couple of live shows, right?
Right. Yeah. So I got asked quite a bit to come and play at different places and with different gospel groups. And of course I did it. I mean, the pay wasn't the big thing. It was just having fun playing music. So yeah, that happened.
Well, and yeah, it's really cool for me. I got the chance to see you play at church many times, and it was always fun. After church, we would come back home, and I would say, "Hey, let's play this part from this song, or play this," and I would just see that creativity would come out.
Right.
And so I'd always kind of hope that, okay, one day, when he retires, he's going to sit down and write, something incredible for sure. So let's focus a little bit on, let's focus on this album that you just released.
Okay.
You just released Everlasting yesterday, and you actually released it as an independent artist.
Right.
So why did you decide to do that instead of going the route that, the majority of artists do, musicians do, by finding a label that most people have heard of and put it out through that label? What was behind your decision to do that differently?
Well, of course, if you were to ask me this about 2 years ago, I would have said I want to try to get signed by a major label. But a very dear friend of yours and mine, who is a Grammy award-winning producer in Los Angeles, Jovan Dawkins, had me down at his studio recording for some of his artists, doing guitar parts for them. And he was telling me that if you get signed by a major label, they're going to direct you. They're going to direct your music. You're going to have to go on the road and work, and you're going to see very little in return. So if you're going to release something, do it independently and do your own promotion, or have other people find you and promote it, and have that freedom. So I knew from that point on, when I talked to him about, it was about 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago when I was down there recording, that I was going to do this my way, my songs, still have them have a vibe to them that would attract people to it, but yet still tell my story my way through the music. So that was it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we're both pretty happy that you decided to do that, because it's been really, really neat to see your creative process take shape over the last 2 years and have that freedom to do that, whereas, you have somebody saying, well, I think we should have it sound this way, or that's, too poppy or too jazzy. So that's, I think we're both pretty stoked that you're doing that.
Absolutely.
So earlier, let's backtrack to when you recorded an EP, and remind me the name of that EP. I think it was Azure. Am I correct with that?
No. Are you talking about the EP I did back in the 90s?
Yeah. I'm trying to go back there, because I remember hearing that as a youngster.
Okay.
And you recorded it. You recorded it a lot differently than you recorded this album that's out now, right. Everlasting. And then, of course, in between there was a small EP that you recorded.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how your experience, writing and recording those was as compared to this major full-length release with Everlasting?
Okay, so back in the 90s, when I think there was like maybe 10 songs on that I wrote. And what I did is I went and bought a Roland keyboard. And this keyboard could play the bass parts and all this other thing. I had a drum machine, but what I had is a 4-track, I can't even remember the name of the 4-track recorder. But what I would do is I would just come up with ideas and a beat. And then I would record these ideas and then put the guitar on top. And it was a lot of fun, but it took a lot of work to mix those 4 tracks into 8. And of course, the sound quality wasn't good, but that was what I played for you when you were in your early teens, I think. Mm-hmm. And, there was no plans on releasing that, because back then I was still doing the worship music in the gospel churches. But it's just a precursor on, I could do it myself. So compared to what I'm doing now is a totally professional way of doing it. I think it was just a good warm up. Right.
And I know you had aspirations to record for many years.
Right.
So why was this the right time to do it? I mean, have you had all these great ideas kind of floating around in your head, and this just kind of came together at the right time?
Okay. So I was kind of forced to get there by my wife, Ellie. So about 4 years ago, she would say, I hear you playing these nice things. Are you writing songs? I said, not really. And she would keep saying, are you writing songs? You should write some songs, and on and on and on. So I began to do that. Just simple chord ideas or melody ideas. No idea what was going to go with it, but I'm thinking, yeah, this sounds really good. So I would get these ideas, and some of them are on this album. And some of these songs, of course, are written when I was getting ready to record.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, she's been a great motivational force for you. And I'm sure, we've had the chance to, when I say we, I mean me and Jada. And
Yeah.
we both had a way of kind of motivating you a little bit to do this, because we all of us knew, the talent that you possessed. And I was, really excited to, to see it all come together. So let's talk a little bit more about that too, as far as the inspiration for the album Everlasting. You talked already about how Ellie kind of pushed you to do that. Where did you get your inspiration for all the songs that are on this album?
I think the best answer for this, Matt, is that every song is a story of what I've experienced in my life. And on this album, you're not going to find any dark, brooding, depressive type songs, even though somebody's life might have those aspects in it, and the songs will reflect a certain point in my life, but they're all songs based on my life's experience all these years. And that, the titles might be a little different than what people are used to, but I have very strong faith, and I want to make the music to honor the person of our faith, and also tell a story about, for instance, there's a song that I wrote for you that in my mind talks about how you perceived through your college and through life and through hardships. I guess that's the best thing I can say about the inspiration for it. And as far as music goes, inspiration, oddly, I went to see Cirque du Soleil in Redmond with Ellie. And I've seen their shows before in Las Vegas, but I went to this particular show called Volta. And I, of course, was watching the acrobats doing their thing, but the music also was touching me. It's like, man, I can feel that. So there's a few songs that I drew inspiration from on there. There's probably my biggest guitar hero right now is Andy Timmons. And a lot of his style I've been drawing inspiration from, because I've been watching and learning and studying his courses, because I feel you always can keep learning regardless of how long you've been playing. But I try to draw from his melodies and do my own perception of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you had the chance to meet him a couple times, didn't you?
Yeah, I met him when he came up to Tacoma in 2017, and I met him and spent a lot of time with him at the NAMM show in Anaheim this last January.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that was really cool. I know, to hear from you, because we all have had those moments to think like, what would it be like to meet our heroes? What would it be like to stand next to the people we look up to so much? I mean, beyond our family members that we're around, which I think we might take for granted sometimes. But yeah, that's awesome. That was really cool for me to see when you met him, because I knew that was going to kind of, reinvigorate you to get the album finished, because you had kind of, as you were writing it, going through the writing process, you did something really cool, which another one of my favorite artists, Brian Zuckerman, who has the band Serenic, he used to send me songs and say, hey, Matt, what do you think of this track? It's kind of a demo track. What do you think? And I would say, well, hey, I really like this part. What about this? And not, I wasn't a musician by any means, but I felt like, my ability to listen to music and kind of say, well, this is something that sounds good, was something that you definitely keyed in on, because our musical tastes are pretty similar when it comes to the style of music that you're writing. So, what kind of challenges did you face though as you were writing Everlasting? I mean, you kind of had a couple moments where you got snagged up at times. What was that like? Do you think that helped you along the way, as far as like, persevering through that, or do you think it was one of those things where it was harder than you expected?
No, it wasn't harder than I expected. I wanted it to flow naturally, and that's why I took my time on it. I've spent over a year getting this project finished. So I wanted to take my time, and I spent many a late night in this very room recording till like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then creeping into bed and trying to be as quiet as possible so I didn't wake Ellie up or whatever. But there were times where I'd kind of get snug up on maybe a bridge phrasing, or the melody line was kind of corny or whatever. So I would keep those lines and drop that song and go to another one and come back when my ears and my mind was refreshed and hear it in a different way or improve it in a different way. So I wanted this album to be as close to perfect as possible, so I could really, come out with my guns ablazing, right? So that people would hear the good part of what I'm trying to convey through the music.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, what are you trying to convey as a whole with this album? How do you want people to feel when they listen to it?
I want them to feel a good vibe, a positive vibe, to be able to move, to be able to drive and listen to it, or feel inspired, because there are some songs that might be sad a little bit in the ballads, but that's for a reason. But a lot of the other stuff, I wanted it to make sure it had a good solid groove and a good beat and kind of modern, I can't say it, more modern feel to it that kids your generation or younger could kind of catch on to. But of course, I'm putting blends of the 70s and 80s and 90s and now the 2000s type of guitar playing in it. And so guitar is my main instrument, but I played the keyboards on it and the bass parts on this as well. So I just wanted to have a good vibe. I didn't want it to be dark. I just wanted it to be good. Does that make sense? Oh,
absolutely. And coming from someone who's listened to the whole thing, I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 times through. I spent the whole afternoon and evening today just listening to the whole thing over and over again, because I really wanted to get the vibe, as we've talked about, of the album down. And it's really cool for me is, I know a lot of your personal backstory and the things that you've overcome and how you've grown over the many years that I've known you. And I have to say, I mean, a couple of the songs made me a little emotional, in a good and also in a sad way, because I mean, the album just starts off, man, it just hits you, and it's just like good vibing, it's upbeat. It's really just, it's continuous, and then you'll have little drop offs in some of the songs, and then you come right back in. But I'd have to say, I've gone through it many times. The Look in Her Eyes is a song that is probably the most emotional for me. I know you wrote it for Ellie. Yeah. Ellie's song. But for me personally, I don't know. There's something about that song that, and I recommend everybody definitely go check that song out for sure if they're really into slower ballad songs. But it just, knowing your personal journey, it's kind of like a nice little, what is the word I'm looking for here? Like an intermission before it comes back hard again, right. Almost like, knowing your life, you had some moments where you got knocked down, and I've seen you pick yourself up. And I think that is really what I'm thinking about when I'm listening to the whole album,
That's cool, Matt. The song, The Look in Her Eyes, that I wrote for Ellie, was very important to me because my bride came to me when I didn't think it was ever going to happen, going through bad choices on my own or just life in general. And I don't know what I'd do without her. I mean, that song was important. That song had to be to the point of expressing how I feel when I look in her eyes, or even the first time I looked in her eyes, how my heart was just melted. So, and it's cool that you interpret it possibly a different way, but that's all right. The guitar on this album is the main instrument. And on that particular song, the guitar had to be not overpowering, but just add the melody and emotion through it, through different ways of playing on a string or sliding into a note that would convey, if you heard it, that hits something in your heart. So you would feel it. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember watching you play at worship at church, and there was a style of music that you would play there to, kind of draw those deep emotions out, I think was kind of how I interpreted it and how they wanted you to play, when the pastor would be speaking or something along those lines, compared to when you kind of get us all up and dancing and jumping around. But another one too, I got to bring this up,
okay.
as since we're sticking with the ballad theme, and then we'll move on to some of the more jazzy, poppy type songs that really they just keep going and going and going. There's no real let up on them, which I love. As I really love the song, I Promise I Will, because I know that that's a song that you've tweaked a bit, but you had that written many years ago, did you not?
Right. I wrote that song for my mother, your grandmother, and I played a rough version of it to her before she passed away. And the old version of it that I wrote back in the 90s was played at her funeral. So that was a song that, of course, is close to my heart, and I had to make sure that I revamped it to put it on this album. And so I reworked it. There's been maybe 5 or 6 versions of it. And I think this one that was released is probably my favorite, because it starts with light, flowy, airy type feel, and then it gets into a groove. It's still a ballad, but then the guitar doesn't get heavy, but the guitar will tell the story of how I'm promising my mother to be a good man and be good and have integrity and so on and so forth. So there you go.
Right. I really like when the keyboard part comes in there, because that was something I remember when the first time when I heard that song, I just kind of imagined, that song being played at Grandma's funeral. And it was an emotional song for me too. And it was, I'm so glad that you decided to put that on there.
Thanks.
A wonderful track.
Thank you.
Let's focus a little bit on the,
Okay.
upbeat songs that we have going on here. The ballads, personally right now, I'm loving the ballads. That's just where I'm at. As you know, our tastes just change almost every day. So tomorrow I might be at work listening to all these different tracks. And one of them that really stands out is the title track, Everlasting. That song is pretty unique in the ways that it kind of changes while you're listening to it.
Right.
And can you talk a little bit about how you crafted that song and what you were going for there?
Okay. So the title Everlasting is referring to family, to friendship, to love for one another. It's everlasting. And we hold on to that. So the main thing I wanted for it was a nice melody, a melody on the guitar that wasn't too heavy, too fast, that was telling the story, but a good funky feel behind it that had a real make you move vibe. And I reworked that song, I think 3 times, where I drew a lot of inspiration from the Cirque du Soleil Volta soundtrack on that, referring to creating atmosphere. So, of course, the beginning of the song starts off a little mellow, then it hits you, and then you go into the verse, and the verse settles you down, and then you go into another chorus, and then a bridge, and the bridge kind of shocks you a little bit, right? But it was just symbolizing every different aspect of being part of a family. There's ups, there's downs, but it's always strong. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. No, and I love that, which I think has to be a challenge. You correct me if I'm wrong, but it's got to be a challenge for an instrumental musician. I know that's not the correct term, but when people ask me, hey, what kind of music does your dad play? I say, well, he's an instrumental musician in that he does all the talking with his instruments.
Right.
And is that more of a challenge to have to convey emotion and tell a story with just instruments, whereas you got all these most of the musicians out there bands have vocalists that paint that picture with the words. Is that a bigger challenge for you, do you think, or do you find it to be pretty natural?
I think if you would ask me this about 3 years ago, I said it's pretty hard. But since I've been paying attention to Andy Timmons and the way he expresses himself, because he's a guitar player, sings a little bit, but his songs are all instrumental. So he looks at the guitar as a voice. And I've kind of looked at it that way. But when I studied with his courses, it made more sense on how to write a verse on the guitar as the main voice. And you don't want it to be super busy, super fast, or shreddy, being speedy. But you want it to also kind of convey, there's ways you can strike the string or play a certain note that's going to convey an emotion. So, picking that up from him, and I just tried to emulate that in my music. And I think that's another part why I wanted to take my time on this album, to make sure that I've got every part of what I'm trying to convey through the music. I was satisfied with it.
Awesome. Did Andy say any, like when you met Andy, did you have the chance to say, hey, you know, I'm writing this album. You know, what kind of advice can you give me when I'm recording an album? I mean, did you have the chance to do that, or did you just kind of sit there and just listen to everything that he was talking about?
I didn't really tell him about what I did or what I'm about, because he remembered me from Seattle, because I was the I was in the first row with Ellie, staring at him at the same time. And then I was the first one in line to get his autograph. And we talked about how he drew inspiration from the Beatles and Kiss and, you know, Led Zeppelin, all that stuff. So he remembered me when I saw him last January at NAMM. So I didn't really tell him about that. And I got to add, another person I met is from Brazil. His name is Sidney Carvalho. And he did a album with Andy that was recorded in Brazil of bossa novas. And he's a beautiful guy. I mean, he's just like Andy, super humble, and got to be really good friends with him for just that 2 days I spent coming down and seeing him and talking to him. And so I think, Andy, I was on Twitter and I had released one of my singles from the album. I think it was maybe Touch the Sky. I didn't promote it or anything. All of a sudden, here comes a tweet from Andy Timmons saying, "Hey, Bobby, looking forward to listen to your record," you know, and I was blown away. That made my day, made my year, actually.
That's really cool. I mean, I can only imagine, you know, getting a shout out from, you know, somebody that I really look up to.
Yeah.
An athlete or, you know, another teacher that's well known. That's an amazing feeling. I was super happy for you when that happened, because I knew that somebody who you looked up to had recognized your talent. And I think there's still going to be a lot of people that don't quite recognize just how talented you are, but that was a really cool moment. So before we get into a little bit about your, you know, production experience recording this album, mm-hmm. doing it all on your own, you talked about that you had released a single. Something really cool happened recently. You had another single released on a college radio station that's got some really positive feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was Touch the Sky.
That was Touch the Sky. Okay.
I have an account on Twitter. I creep on there every now and then, and I post or tweet things every now and then. But I hooked up with a DJ. Her name is JJ Kane. She's out of the UK. And I just sent her a message. Hey, what's it going to take for you listen to one of my songs and see if you'll play it? So send it to me. So I sent it to her. She put it on. And it was in her rotation for a while. And there's also an independent radio station down in LA called ISR that I sent my music to. And they're going to play that as well. It's Touch the Sky on that one as well. So that was a big thing for me, because as indie artists, we're not the mainstream. We're not like this popular thing this isn't a slam against popular music, but to my ears, I listen to it and it's all the same. It's everybody singing the same, or they have the same drum effects, or they have so on and so forth. So I wanted my stuff to be true to myself and not go that route. And so the production on this thing, we can jump into this, you know, going down to LA to record for Jovan Dawkins and his HMG Universal Group. I had a chance, of course, to talk to Jovan over and over again about production and how to mix. And I spent some time talking to his engineer, his name is Larry Witt. He's another beautiful guy, and really asking questions about, you know, how do I tighten up the low end on this, and so on and so forth. So I paid a lot of attention to those guys and watched them work, paid a lot of attention to it. And so I wanted to transfer what I'd learned from there into my process, because I'm starting from anew. And of course, watching YouTube videos from well-known producers and engineers, it absolutely helps. But that's another reason why it took over a year to get this thing done, because I wanted it done as close to perfect as possible.
Right. That's something I've always known about you when it comes to your music is you're a perfectionist, you know, but I think because of that, this album, you know, Everlasting, turned out so much better than I think it would have had you have just rushed it. I mean,
Sure.
let's look back a year and a half. You were sent me some songs, like these are some ideas that I have for some music, or this is kind of a rough draft of what I'm looking to do. And man, I mean, the songs sound completely different. I mean, they really do. They're clearer. They've got more of like the right vibe to them for your music. I mean, seeing the progression of this music over the last year and a half has been really cool. And I'm lucky enough that I've had them all sent to me and had the chance to give my input. And that's been, I think, really cool to be involved in that production process for you. But being an indie artist, you're not working in a studio. You know, you're not in a big studio with all this equipment there. You've really done this on your own. Can you talk a little bit about what that process has been like for you over the last year and a half, 2 years, from where you started, kind of putting some ideas down to, like getting through to today, or to Friday when the album came out?
Sure. So again, I'll draw to Jovan. Jovan has set me up with the best, what his opinion was the best DAW system, which is a digital recording system, and I use Logic Pro X or Pro 10. And so, getting the Mac set up and starting off with just using stock plugins, which are effects that you can use off of Logic. That's all fine and good, but I did my research on independent companies that have good plugins like Sound Toys. I mean, that's my number one company. I love their products. And Waves, of course, that have some nice low-end features that you can put on bass or bass drums and that sort of thing. So I did a lot of research on what are the strongest for rock type music, because I would describe my music as rock, jazz, maybe a little bit popish. So I wanted to find the best tools to make that sound good just in my home little studio, right? I mean, I don't have the equipment that Jovan has down in LA, but I think that I've got enough of the products in my system and, my MIDI controller and my monitors and so on and so forth, that I think you can compare my album to what's being mass produced, and it's pretty darn close. So I guess that's basically how I achieve this, and not, having a big budget to spend on it because, I've got a family, right? And so, I'd be very mindful of the cost and what were the pros or the cons to each instrument plugin that I was going to get. So I guess that's how I achieved this. That makes sense?
Yeah. Well, Bobby, I will say that after when the album dropped Thursday at midnight East Coast time, which was 8 o'clock for us Alaskans, we have that advantage of getting it 4 hours earlier than everybody else. But when I listened to it, I think the first thing I thought to myself is, he did it. He got the sound to sound just as good as any other music that I have pulled off of iTunes. Because, last week I pulled an album on Apple Music of one of my favorite musicians, Dan Tompkins, and I was thinking, this is pretty darn good, a little quiet. And the fact that when yours came out, it was even louder than that and sounded super crisp and clear. That was, I think, your number one priority you were going for, is to get it on that level. And I think you've achieved that. And I would, love to hear somebody tell me that it's not, because I think everybody would agree that when they listen to it, my friend Greg, who I host the podcast with, who you've seen on plenty of my episodes, he listened to it and he said, man, I remember listening to this kind of stuff growing up. This is super good. This is super clear. And so, I mean, you've got, I'm trying to get new fans for you out there to just realize that this album's right up there with on the production level of anybody else that's got much more expensive equipment than you do. So that's awesome. I think you should feel pretty proud about that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's a big achievement, and I'm not to say that I'm not going to keep adding to my studio here. I am, but I feel I'm at a good starting point, and I'll continue to improve things as we go. I want a good career out of this. The bottom line is, I want to play out. I want to play my songs live, but I also want to produce too. And I was talking to a indie artist today from Ireland. Her name is Sonia, and she was asking me, did you produce this yourself? I said, yeah. And she sent me one of her songs, and it's on Spotify. I think it's called "Breathe" by Sonia D. Just the letter D. And it's a beautiful song and beautiful vibe. It's kind of Celtic and folky, but I said, hey, if you want me to produce one of your songs before you release your album, go ahead and send it to me, and I'll do that for you. So I'm kind of working on that as well. I love this production part of it. Of course, music first, right? But the production part of it, I'm going to owe to Jovan, because Jovan is a world-class drummer, but he's also a bigger world-class producer. And just watching him work and his staff it's amazing. I learned tons. And then being at NAMM, of course, this last year I got to meet tons of people, networking through different companies, and plan on going back again this coming January in 2020 and build even more. But the bottom line is produce music that people like and enjoy, that brings them good vibes, play every now and then produce for other people as well.
Well, I have to say, since you've taken such a big interest in production and music production, I've also really enjoyed digging deeper into some of the music that we both love. I mean, we talked about the Tears for Fears song, Woman in Chains.
Yeah.
There's so many incredible layers to that song. And since you've been making your album, I thought, I wonder if I can go find some sort of program that lets me isolate different sounds in there. And I haven't found it yet. I mean, I know of it, but they're very expensive. So, I'm waiting for you to get that, by the way, so we can do this with all these songs that we love. But it's really helped me take an even greater interest into music production. And it's really been neat, because when I came to visit you last time, we sat down, I want to say 2 visits ago, you pulled up a song that didn't have a title yet, but it was like, hey, Matt, this is the idea that I have. Listen to it with me. So you cranked up the speakers, and I saw, like 60 something layers within the program that you use. What is the name of that program one more time?
Logic Pro.
Logic 10. Pro.
Logic Pro 10. Yeah.
Logic Pro 10, right? And you just got your new Mac, so everything was running crisp and smooth, and it really helped me appreciate not just your music, but I mean everybody's music in general. Like, oh my gosh, think of how many layers go into each song. And so, yeah, just really amazing. It's been a fun time to gain even more appreciation for each song that I listen to nowadays. It definitely helps me add another layer of interest within the music. So do you think, kind of moving on, do you think you are going to focus more on the production side of things, in the future here, or are you hoping to focus just as much on, writing more music for yourself? And where are you seeing your time going?
Yeah, I understand. I think, well, of course, it's going to lean more towards the music side, but I also want to delve deeper into the production side of it. I'm not just stopping with this album. I've been working on, because this holiday, Christmas, is so important to me. I've been working on an EP for Christmas, and I want to get this done early so I don't have the anxiety of getting it last minute done with the artwork or the so on and so forth. I want to get this ready to go to release in November. So I'm going to do that, but I'm going to continue to write. I have more ideas on my Mac than I can count right now. So I'm going to write out this album, Everlasting, for a while and let the momentum pick up even more. I mean, I'm getting great responses from all over the world right now, from people on Twitter and my Facebook page as well. So I'm going to promote this some more. I think that Stereo Stickman, which is a online music blog, they did a review on Touch the Sky that increased my traffic, by 30%. And I think they want to do a review of the album. So I think that's going to come up, and then we'll do some live shows in the Seattle area in July and August. And I'm just going to sit back and let it go. I mean, I have to have faith that I put the work into this thing, that, it's going to do its own traction. Of course, I'm going to promote and have people help me promote it, but it's going to gain momentum and do its own traction. So to build this career at this stage of my life, I mean, that would be amazing.
Right. Well, and that's going to be the thing too, is just trying to be patient. I can only imagine that, the album comes out and you're like, okay, let's start seeing some. So let's start seeing some reviews like right now. Let's go. Because you got some of these big time artists that get albums reviewed 2-3 days before they come out and kind of promote them, or in some cases not promote them because they're not very good. But it would be really neat to see, if some of these blogs that review music that's similar to yours can all they got to do is get their hands on it once and say, oh my gosh, who is this guy? I can't believe I haven't heard him before. I'm guessing that's what a lot of people's reactions were that heard Touch the Sky. Like, who the heck is this? I've never heard of this musician before. Let me go check him out. So yeah, hoping that happens sooner than later. You said you're going to be playing some live shows and you're working on doing that right now. What kind of a live show are you looking at? Are you looking to open up for a band? Are you looking to do your own thing? What's the idea there?
Well, it's just going to be me, but I think I'm going to have somebody, a good friend of mine named David McKenzie, come in and do a few of his originals, and then I'll do my songs to close the night. It's probably going to be smaller venues because I want it to be more intimate, and not necessarily in a bar, because when you're in a bar, people are drinking, they're not even paying attention. But I have places in mind that I can have this done at. So I'll be playing to recorded tracks. I don't have a band with me right now. But as things grow, then I'll add the band together. But just be playing live guitar to the backing tracks is what I'm going to do. And I just want to, draw some more attention to the music and do these live shows and hope they go good.
That's awesome. Yeah, we all got the chance. The family got a chance to see you play live at an event in downtown Seattle where they were honoring different police officers. So that was something we haven't said on the show. You're a retired police officer. Yes. Obviously, thank you so much for everything that you've done, all your service. I mean, it's been really cool to see. I mean, cool, but also kind of funny, because I knew when you retired, you were going to have this like chunk where you're like, what am I going to do now? and it's been really cool to see, going from that to, just the other day, you were putting the finishing touches on one of the songs. I mean, it really, you did everything you possibly could and put so much time and effort into getting the music perfect. And I definitely think that it's the best that you've ever done. And I hope that a lot of people, after listening to this interview, can go and have, the chance to listen to the album as a whole, because I don't think it's an album that, you say, okay, well, this song is pretty good and this song is pretty good. But so I'm generally going to listen to those two, and I might let another one or two play, which I think we're all guilty of doing.
Right.
But I mean, in my personal experience, I think anybody that listens to this album, you got to start from the beginning and play it all the way through first before deciding, like I have at the moment, which songs you want to listen to specifically, because it really needs to be enjoyed as a whole. And I know that was the experience that you want all of us listeners to have, correct?
Right. I positioned each track as a part of the story of my life, and everything goes in order. So, it's going to start off kind of big. It's going to stay in that area. Then it's going to drop down a little bit. Then it's going to get into a driving song, Mystery of Tears. And then we're going to break down to a ballad about, the look in your eyes, that sort of thing. So to me, it was important to try to position each track so you would want to keep listening, just not stop at one. You might have your favorite track on the album. And I don't expect everybody to like the whole thing, but if they listen to it through the whole album wise, then they can pick their favorites, and they could kind of picture, yeah, I get it, where this cat's going from this really high, kind of high, low sort of thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think you've definitely got that vibe going on that album. Before we kind of wrap up, is there any shout outs that you'd like to throw out that we haven't got in the show? Anybody you'd like to thank, or anybody you'd like to mention with helping you get this album out to the public here? Well,
of course, shout out to God for watching over me and my family for all these years. But, my wife, Ellie, I thank her for putting up with me and being an encouragement. But to you and your sister, Jada, I mean, just being there and, making sure that I continue pursuing this dream. And then, your stepbrother and stepsister, Jordan and Jackie, they're also the same, very supportive and encouraging me to continue. But, you know, I'm so thankful for my father making me practice, and I'm so thankful for my brother being my first hero. I'm so thankful for, you know, all the artists, that the big time artists that have given me inspiration that I've loved, from Terry Kath to Alan Murphy to Larry Carlton to Bruce Conti to Buzz Featon, and up to Andy Timmons, who, I mean, I love the dude. The dude cannot go wrong in his music for me, whether he's playing jazz or if he's shredding or if he's playing bossa nova. The cat can play anything. So, you know, I'm thankful for all that stuff. I'm thankful for, you know, Javon Dawkins for believing me back in 2017 and getting this career of mine, you know, started, and pushing me and giving me opportunities to record for other artists in LA. And I think that's about it.
I think that is awesome, because I think if everyone right now is in the same room and we were all listening to the album, including Grandma and Grandpa and Uncle Dan, I think we'd all be extremely proud of you persevering and getting this music completed and finished.
Thanks.
And yeah, you're welcome. I'm really super proud of you, Dad.
All right, son.
Super proud of you for pushing through and getting it finished and seeing it through. I think you've definitely got a bright career ahead of you. I'm really excited to be able to come see you here soon and talk music and see what kind of ideas you have for the future, and also get the chance to watch you play. That's going to be amazing for me. And to everybody listening, hey, thank you for sticking around and listening to the first interview of this new series called Limitless Interviews that I'm going to be doing on my YouTube channel here. And hope you enjoyed and are feeling a little inspired to go listen to my dad's album Everlasting. And in the description below, we're going to be listing all the places that you can get it: iTunes, Spotify. It's on YouTube right now, streaming as well. And I don't know, it's up to you, Bobby. Would you like me to link anybody else down in the description there for people to check out?
I think you covered the major ones: Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, Deezer, Google Play, Amazon. It's on every major digital music outlet. Yeah, go listen to it now. No.
Is it going to be coming out in a physical copy? I know some people are going to ask, are you doing vinyl or CDs by any chance?
Well, I don't want to really talk about that. Let's say this, that if you come to a live show, you can find out. Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
Cool. Well, I just figured I'd ask, because there's always people that, and you were like this for a long time. So was I, you know, where we grab those old school copies of CDs. We like having it, but I think most of us have moved on to the digital side of things, especially because music sounds so good already. Well, Bobby, thanks again for joining me. It's been awesome to have you be my first solo interview, and really excited to see where your career goes from here.
Thank you, Matt. Son, peace.
All right, everybody, take care.